Good morning to Eman. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Dan. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to be going to a new location for the show. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you're in Malta. Is that right?
I am based myself in Cyprus, but
Okay,
the shows, we have 7 shows around the world. It started in Malta, yes.
that's true. Sorry. So I thought you were in Malta, but you're actually in Cyprus today. But anyway, that's still a new territory. I've been in many places around the world, but not in Cyprus. So thank you for joining us. You've built an incredible career, the founder of SiGMA World, which is the leading iGaming platform. More recently, Ikigai Ventures. I probably pronounced that wrong, but you can
Perfectly.
correct me. And we're going to talk a lot about that. Before we do so, Eman, it would be good to understand a bit more about you as an individual. So I'd like to take you back a number of years and just share a bit about your upbringing and how you think it shaped you today.
Yeah, I come from very humble beginnings. Today, I wonder how my mom, my dad, my parents raised a family of 5 with, 600, 700 euros a month.
Wow.
I look back and I'm like, but how, like, because I grew up never questioning how poor we were, so I'm eternally grateful to that, because that also shaped who I am today. That was my childhood. Going into adolescence, it was my dream to become an elite athlete. I wanted to represent my country, my tiny island of Malta,
Right.
in the Olympic Games. I
Yeah.
wanted to become an Olympian. And it's there where I realized that despite having the potential to become an Olympian, the financial means weren't there for me to achieve that. And that, made me think that, okay, moving forward, I want financial freedom. I don't want this to ever happen again.
Sure.
So I diverted my frustration, I diverted my discipline in competitive sport into business. I knew nothing of business. My family doesn't come from a background of business. So you can only imagine the countless times I fucked up, with trying to build a business.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
So
And an Olympian, was there a specific sport that you were interested in representing your country at the Olympics in?
yeah, I was training competitively, doing track and field. Triple jump was my event. And I'll
Triple.
tell you one thing, it's tough on your knees, it's tough on your back, that event. Very few people do the triple jump. It's probably the least popular
Yeah, I was going to
event.
say I've never had a guest on the podcast that has told me that they've attempted the triple jump, never mind attempted to be in the Olympics as a triple
Yeah.
jumper. How do you get into triple jumping? I just have to ask. Why?
Yeah, that's a great question. You get into track and field,
Yeah,
and then then what your body is best for, you kind of start drifting into
yeah,
whether you're a sprint athlete or a long distance athlete or a jumper. Then you start drifting into your event as you progress. And
interesting.
triple jump happened to be the event where my body type excels
Right.
most.
Okay. So I guess what you're telling me, Iman, is that not the struggle, but the fact that you couldn't necessarily do what you wanted to do because you didn't have the financial means drove you and gave you the appetite to have your own independent financial freedom. Would that be correct?
I was driven by that,
Yeah.
correct?
Because other people I speak to, and I guess people you speak to and listen to as well, come from very privileged backgrounds and they still have the drive to do that as well. I guess sometimes the fear of losing what they had. So I'm always interested in this sort of balance between nature and nurture. Were there sort of any pivotal moments or mentors or experiences in those formative and early days that helped sort of guide you to the path that you've taken now?
Yeah, great question. So I wasn't, I had no clue how to enter the business world,
Yeah.
but I always loved people.
Okay.
I love helping people. I love being useful to someone. that has always been something that has been part of who I am. I think I got that from my mother, who's also that type of person.
Yeah.
And I remember during campus days when I was a university student, someone approached me to organize a party with them. And I said, yeah, sure, let's do it. And from 4,000 delegates, I was responsible for bringing 3,000 of those with delegates. I call them delegates because now I'm in the conference business. Party goers.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so from 4,000, party goers, I was
Yeah.
responsible for selling 3,000 of those. And I remember standing next to the DJ booth. This was a New Year's Eve of 2004. So I sold the tickets in 2003.
Okay.
I remember standing there, feeling impressed, goosebumps everywhere, realizing that everyone in front of me is having the time of their life because of something that, well, I didn't think of it at the time. It was my then partner. But because of that, there's all these people having a great time of the life. And it was there where I had this Eureka moment. I said, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Interesting. You're not the first person to have said that to me. I've had a few people that started with family parties, or
Even, yeah.
big family get-togethers. And it's interesting. Lots of people that don't understand the events industry will say to me, "Oh, you're in events, you organise parties," but because they don't understand conferences or trade shows. But it's interesting that those early days. So you continued that for what, a number of years, right? Was it about
Yeah, this
10
actually
years?
what you said is very interesting. I don't blame people for thinking that events is just parties.
Yeah.
I did parties for 10 years. I didn't even know there was a way out of parties
Right.
into conferences until 2013 when I had the second Eureka moment. And I'll tell you one thing, I love doing events. It's what I want to do. But I started becoming frustrated because I didn't want to do parties anymore. I
Right.
didn't feel fulfilled by getting, 4,000, 10,000 people hammered. That wasn't driving me anymore.
Sure.
Until the day I realized, listen, there's actually a way out of parties. I can still do events, but I pivot into conferences. And 2013, 14 was when this drastic shift happened.
And is
10
that
years ago.
because you attended a conference yourself and you saw?
No, I had no clue
Yeah.
how to run conferences. I had never been to a conference myself. But the people who spend the most at my parties was the gaming community, the iGaming community.
Okay.
Those were the most affluent in Malta. They're the ones who popped bottles at my parties. So
Right.
I said, let's stop focusing on this. Focus on this because that's where the money is.
Yeah.
And the idea of organizing SiGMA is an acronym for Summit of iGaming, IG, in Malta, MA. The
Right.
Summit of iGaming in Malta is represented by the acronym SiGMA, which nowadays is more of a brand encompassing all we do. And that's how it took off. Year one, we had 1,000 people coming to the conference, and it was mostly exhibitors who loved my parties and just trusted me.
Right.
But from then on, it took off like wildfire.
So it's interesting because when you launch an event, obviously, I guess you have to be confident that you're going to get attendees. You know, so I guess you had, whilst you don't know, you had some confidence because almost you were like transporting your existing contacts into just a different setup to a certain extent. You weren't starting from zero. You weren't going into an
Yeah,
industry.
but yeah, I'd say confidence, a mix of confidence, brute force. You cannot let anyone doubt you, and a decent dose of naivety.
Yeah.
Because looking back, like I knew nothing of iGaming, and yet I wanted to do a conference. I didn't know what made the iGaming. Like I was clueless. So looking back, I was completely naive, but I just put the blinkers on and went for
Yeah.
it.
It's
No,
interesting
and
because sometimes lack of experience and lack of knowledge actually helps drive us forward. Because if we have too much knowledge, we then have evidence in our
you keep
brains
doubting. Yeah,
to suggest this isn't going to work because it
correct.
hasn't worked for someone else, or it did something else and it didn't work in that space. So again, a bit of less, I guess, education for people that are listening. if they're on their own journey and they're like, oh, is this going to work, not work? I guess sometimes you've got to go for it and feel the fear and do it anyway. I think there was a book that was released with that title. Would you agree with that?
Living proof. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. So for people that, because this podcast goes around the world and definitely outside of Europe, people that don't understand Malta, where it sits, the location, just tell us a bit about Malta, and then we're going to talk more about SiGMA World.
Yeah. Malta is a very tiny state. 500,000 people make the Maltese population. Very industrious people, extremely industrious people. Government has always been vociferous at embracing new sectors. So Malta did an exceptional job in financial services back in the 90s. Malta did an excellent job regulating the online gambling space.
Right.
In the early 2001, it set up the Malta Gaming Authority, which basically regulated a space that was still embryonic. We barely have the internet, yet Malta has a framework telling companies, listen, there's no framework in Sweden, so you don't know if you're breaking the law or not.
Yeah.
You can come to Malta, you can set up an office here, you can employ people. We have a regulatory framework where you can operate.
Right.
So with this, hundreds of gaming companies came for the Malta license. And that's how the gaming industry flourished. Malta has done a good job regulating those spaces. It has done it on artificial intelligence, more recently on blockchain technology, on medical cannabis, on pharma, on vessel registration. Like after Panama, Malta has one of the most densely populated registration for sea vessels and planes. So Malta's very good at finding these niches and going for it. Yeah.
Interesting. Thank you. It's always good to sort of put that into context. And I guess at the time you started SiGMA World, there were other large gaming events, right, around the world. And again, people listening, a bit of education if they're looking to launch an event in a market where, there are already players, because it's very rare that you will be able to launch something where nothing else exists. And that's not always a good thing because it doesn't suggest there's a market. What gave you the confidence that you thought you can, get the exhibitors? Attendees are one thing because they might be local to the region. Exhibitors that were maybe elsewhere, and convincing them that Malta was the place to be.
Yeah. So when I started, I had no research, as I told you.
Yeah.
More naive than anything. But I soon realized that, the internet is there to stay. People will always want to gamble. And the only way for governments is to regulate the space. Saying iGaming is illegal and trying to ban it completely will only result in sending players underground, where they play on rogue websites which are not protecting the player, which are unregulated. As a government, you don't want it. You don't want your citizens to play on rogue websites using VPN and be at risk like that. Governments also want to collect taxes from this activity. So the only way to go is regulate, regulate, regulate. Looking around us, we saw that very few countries, as of yet, had a regulatory framework for online gambling. So we knew we're here, and there's a long way to go for this sector to flourish. Couple that with the fact that there's hardly any barriers for any company to expand beyond its comfort zone. So if today we're operating in Sweden, tomorrow we can start operating in Brazil. All we need is to change, the language, do some other tweaks, and before you know it, you've opened up to a market of 250 million people. So very little barriers to entry. So, these are this is an explosive formula for the industry to grow.
Yeah.
And because of that, we had the confidence that the demand for conferences will expand.
Yeah. Talk us about the first few years, because obviously now Sigma World, I guess, is a global brand. You would describe it. You've taken the event to other territories, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and how you did that and why you did that. But the first few years in that first territory, I think maybe up to 2019, or just definitely before the pandemic, talk about the trajectory of growth, some of the things that you did to grow the event. Again, people listening, they might be interested in that journey.
With pleasure. So yes, we stayed in our comfort zone in Malta until 2018.
Okay.
2018, I packed up, went to Manila, and we wanted to replicate the formula in Asia.
Okay.
Market of 4.5 billion people, you can't go wrong. So we set up in the Philippines where there was a license, and then COVID had other plans for us. So we had to delay launching the show in Asia. Went back to Malta, again, back to our comfort zone
Yeah.
during the pandemic. Then shortly after, actually during the pandemic, we launched the first show in Dubai. The reason we launched Dubai was because the Emirates was vociferous in vaccinating its citizens and was at the forefront in opening up again its
Yeah.
borders. So we felt comfortable, it was a do or die situation. Unless we do an event, we're gonna die, we're gonna file for bankruptcy. So 2021, in the midst of COVID, we couldn't do a show in Malta, we did it in Dubai.
Wow.
So you
Okay.
can safely say that COVID was a beautiful silver lining in the sense that it pushed us to get out of our comfort zone.
Interesting. So, and give us a sense of the size of the event up until that point. So, from when you launched, I guess that would make it what, 7 or 8 years before the first edition. To that point, maybe just before the pandemic or the show in Dubai. Can you give us a sense of size? Exhibitors, delegates, maybe top
Yeah,
line revenue. Yeah.
in Malta 2018, we had around 14,000 delegates.
Wow. Yeah.
In 2000, close to 20,000 delegates.
Yeah.
And then 2021, we opened up again. 2020 was brutal,
Yeah.
trying to keep a sinking ship
Yeah.
afloat. Then 2021, we did Dubai, and the feedback was amazing. Imagine all the delegates hungry to start flying again after a whole year and a half of hiatus. Going out again, conferences, meeting people. The energy was electrifying in
Yeah.
Dubai.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, we did the show in Malta again. So 2021, we had two shows: a big one in Dubai, a big one in Malta.
Sure. And then, I mean, I read, and if this is not correct, correct me if I'm wrong, that around before the pandemic, maybe, and this wouldn't be a surprise, that you were looking to maybe sell the show or merge with another company. But obviously, the pandemic changed those plans. But as you said, it allowed you to then catapult into other territories. And now, give us a sense of Sigma World as it is today. How many locations are you in? How many shows you're doing? The total volume of delegates, and so on.
Yeah, thank God for the pandemic again there, because yes, we were entertaining the idea of an exit,
Yeah,
which now fast forward 5 years, we're looking at a valuation that's 4x what it was pre-pandemic. So I'm glad we didn't do that at
sure.
the time. A bit where we stand today, we have 7 shows worldwide, covering most geographical locations for the industry. We have the largest representation of gaming when it comes to events, when it comes to media.
Yeah,
So that is something that we cherish. We are very, very proud of that fact. We have over 100,000 delegates that come to our shows, unique delegates. So we have delegates who come to multiple shows.
right.
Unique delegates is around 100,000 delegates. And yeah, something that we're pushing now is, besides the events,
Yeah,
so we're very strong on the B2B side. In iGaming, we like to use this term of prosumers. It's consumers who are extremely knowledgeable about the industry. They know all about the regulation, about who's producing the games, the slots. They know everything about odds. So they're very meticulous about which sites to play on. So because of this, we decided to turn SiGMA into the most trusted authority where the regulators, the B2B industry, but also the players converge. And so recently we embarked on this project where we're trying to turn our site, our platform, into the most trusted authority where players can find reviews of games, reviews of casino and sports betting sites, and they also can come to us for ADR. ADR is alternative dispute resolution. So both operator and players, they agree to settle any disputes they may have with us arbitrarily. And that has been working really, really well. So when you talk about SiGMA, it's not just B2B events,
Sure.
but it's also C platform.
Thank you. And do you see that continuing? Like, if you take the pie of income or profitability, do you see the growth more in those other areas of the business?
Yeah, great question. As things stand, the B2C is representing 5% of our revenues.
Yeah.
And for sure, we do see a huge potential for that to grow. We won't be surprised to see a hockey stick
Yeah.
coming along because SEO, good SEO, like good food, takes time to cook. And we've been working on this project for the past 2 years, and the results are extremely encouraging.
Sure. Let me just pause for a minute. You know, we spoke about when you started the first event in Malta in 2014. Okay. You said there were what, 1,000 delegates? Pretty much. And those delegates were people that you knew from your parties. And you've just said to me, you now have 100,000 coming. Okay. And it's easy to sit, you know, to not look at your successes, right? You just carry on and carry on. I mean, what pride do you take? And are you, you know, do you look in amazement and think, wow, look where we've come from to where we are today?
I should do it more often. We don't have the luxury to, pull the handbrake
Sure.
and, just soak it all in. But yes, I see myself extremely lucky to be in a space at a time where we grew together with the industry. You know, you have to acknowledge that demand for iGaming has exploded in 2014-15. That
Yeah.
was exactly the time when we stepped into the industry.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been, extremely helpful in us expanding so aggressively. We realized this early on, so we went for it. And yeah, I still don't see any signs of plateau in the nearby future,
Sure.
because there's huge demand. Governments are regulating the space. No governments are reversing such decisions. So it's quite frankly a great sector
Yeah.
to be involved with. And you see the mood of private equity, large firms today. Whereas in the past they frowned upon the vertical, they shied away from embracing it in their portfolio. We see the mood changing drastically, nowadays. If you have tier one countries, the UK, Nordics, the US, regulating the space, why shouldn't it feature
Yeah.
in such portfolios?
So it's interesting the fact that there is regulation, because regulation is not always can be seen as a positive thing. But the fact what you're saying is the fact that there is regulation and you're in the territories where it's regulated gives confidence to investors that this is something that they should be okay to get involved with.
Correct. Yeah, we're all for regulation in gaming. That
Yeah.
has always been our mantra. And it has enabled us to work closely also with governments.
Sure.
We do get approached by a lot of governments who want to see the conference taking place in their countries. And that has enabled us, to expand so aggressively as well.
And let's talk about the different countries that you're in, because there's a lot of talk about geo cloning. And then I had the chief exec of DMG Events, Jeff Dickinson, and his team ban the word geo cloning. They call it geo adapting because it's not just as simple as just taking one event to another, right? You have to adapt to the territory. We spoke about Malta. I'm
Correct,
sure
correct.
Dubai is different, somewhere else is different. How do your events show up in different regions? What are the sort of
Yeah.
nuances? How do you make sure that you get the culture right, and so on?
Yeah, I love that term. We like to use another term, which I copied from a very, very good author, Thomas Friedman, who talks about glocalisation. It's not
Global.
globalization, but it's glocalisation, because you
Yeah.
go global, but you act local wherever you are. And we use that mantra in our business. Rather than having one central office in, let's say, Malta or the UK, we have 7 offices around the world: an office in Sao Paulo, an office in Manila, an office in Noida, India, an office in Malta, Cyprus, and Belgrade. And we have more offices in the pipeline. One in Las Vegas is being
Right.
planned. And the reason we do this is, one, to have local expertise, curating the networking events. We need to understand where to go, what to do, how to do it. If you look at our website, it's in 10 different languages.
Yeah.
So any piece of content reaches far outside English speaking markets. And that has helped us tremendously as well with many different communities. So yeah, we believe a lot in this term glocalization, and we do empower our teams in all those offices to take decisions, to make mistakes.
Yeah.
We try and instill a culture where it's okay to to do mistakes. We don't want our workforce to shy away from taking calculated risks, because the fear of getting punished outweighs the reward of doing something good. So, I'm obsessed about this element, so whenever the team comes to me with a problem, I
Yeah.
joke, I tell them, don't come to me with a problem, come to me with an apology and the solution, and let's discuss that together. And they love, they always come, hey, yeah, man, I apologize, but I have a solution.
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
joke about it, and it's good because it empowers, decentralized decision making.
Sure. Thank you for that term, glocalization. It's the first time that I've
Yeah,
heard.
Thomas Friedman, it's not my term.
Well, we'll
So
say it's your term. And how many staff do you have at the moment across the group?
yeah, we're around 200 people.
200. So your leadership style would have had to evolve, right? When you're launching the first event, business, might be just you and a partner and a few staff, you're getting involved in absolutely everything. I'm sure you still get involved, but how's your journey evolved as a leader over the last 10, 15 years?
Yeah, I wish I worked in a company before, or even as an employee. I wish I had that experience, but I never worked in a company, so I had no clue how to how to dissect a company into different departments. I never knew what a marketing team does, or what a sales team does, or because I never was exposed to it. I always did parties after graduating. I did parties, and the only employees I had were freelancers who you recruit for the party: bar staff, DJs, security. That's it. I had absolutely no experience. So I did a lot of mistakes, You know, Looking back, I cringe at some of the mistakes I did. I used to be frustrated a lot, and this stemmed out from the lack of understanding. But yeah, experience does help. There's no textbook that prepares you for the shrewd life of entrepreneurship as good as real life experiences do. So nowadays, I feel I'm a lot more grounded, better prepared. I I've realized that, yeah, you need to empower your team to take decisions.
Sure.
If you want to scale, you cannot be the one and all. It's impossible. It's
Yeah.
impossible. And then having my 2 daughters, in 2018, I had my first child. Having my 2 daughters also, made me a lot calmer. A lot a lot calmer. So yeah.
Well, that's interesting. What has being a parent taught you about yourself and leadership, and have you managed to take that into your business life?
I think so. I honestly, I don't know how it panned out, but yeah, nothing. It's mistakes, it's not a big deal. It's okay. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it has helped me a lot to deal with much bigger problems. If with a big company, you become a target easily. It's much easier to become a target. When you're a startup, you're allowed to make mistakes.
Sure.
The clients, they give you a tap on the back. It's okay, Eman.
Sure. Sure.
When you become this multinational corporation, you're not allowed to make mistakes.
Yeah.
On the outside.
Yeah.
So the stakes are higher, the stress is higher. So you need to be able to control those stress levels
Yeah.
by empowering your team a bit better as well.
Makes sense. I want to move on to the VC fund that you set up 3 years ago, I think now, Ikigai Ventures. Talk to us about that. Why you decided to, I guess, pivot, to coin a phrase, into the world of venture, being a venture capitalist. What type of companies you're investing
Thank
in,
you.
how it's gone, and so on.
Thank you. Yes, Ikigai Ventures took off in the midst of COVID 2020. The idea took off. I felt like I was becoming redundant because events weren't happening, and I needed, to channel my energy into other stuff. Couple that with the fact that I know a lot of rock stars in the industry, a lot of billionaires, multimillionaires. They love what I do. They trust me. And do I keep using this wealth of a network to sell a stand? Is that all I can do?
Yeah.
So the idea of Ikigai Ventures took off. I brought these rock stars to pitch in with some cash. We launched this UK fund, and it was a steep learning curve for me, learning what a GP is, what an LP is, how to
Yeah.
run a fund. It's been a beautiful experience because of the platform SiGMA, and because we use the platform as an unfair advantage to the fund. We've been doing exceptionally well with it. So we invest in individuals who have found their ikigai. It's a beautiful Japanese word, ikigai, which means you have found your ikigai if you're good at what you do, if you love what you do, if it pays you well, and if you're contributing to solving a problem in society. So we invest in people who have found their ikigai and people who are in the iGaming business or in the frontier tech business. We also incubated a number of projects through Ikigai Ventures. It's now in its third year running, and we have another 5 years to go before we need to close the fund and return 6, 7, 8x
Wow.
or more to the LPs who have trusted us with their pennies.
Interesting. Thank you. I was doing my research, and I believe it actually translates as reason for being. Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
I love everything Japanese.
You said
I
this
have a
before. Tell me why. What excites you and about the Japanese culture?
well, look, take a look at longevity. The place where people live the most is in this remote place called Okinawa. You've had sociologists flying in to try and understand what leads a person to live so peaceful and long. And they've attributed all of this to this way of life, which is ikigai. And it includes many facets, the way they eat, the way they look at their way of life, the way they work, if they enjoy doing it, if they love doing it, if it contributes to society. So I'm fascinated by everything Japanese. Another fascination of mine is kintsugi. I'll tell you very briefly. I don't want to deviate too much.
No, no, go.
Kintsugi is the art of fixing pottery with gold.
Okay.
So using this analogy, whenever something breaks in the Western world, whenever something breaks, whether it's a washing machine or a relationship, the tendency for us is to throw it away, you know, because we don't like the scars that come with it. In Japanese culture, the scars are now made of gold. So actually, the scars become the most beautiful part of this object, of the pottery. And it's a way of seeing things, right? So if you see the scars moving forward as the most beautiful thing there is, the tendency is you will not part ways with anything that's broken. So, that's another philosophy, which is Japanese, that I'm really, really fond of.
Interesting. Thank you very
So,
much.
yeah, anything Japanese, I'm a sucker for.
That's an education. Entrepreneurship, not for everybody and not for the faint-hearted. Again, if you've got someone listening on their sort of entrepreneurial journey, what's the one piece of advice that you might give them?
Yeah, I like to be very careful before giving advice
Yeah.
to anyone,
Yeah.
because not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur. So me telling them, being an entrepreneur is great, you need to do this. No, there are people who are happy writing someone else's book.
Yeah.
I wanted to write my own book. I dreaded the idea of working for someone else who doesn't have, the same ideas that I have. In a way, I was always scared of becoming addicted to the paycheck as well. So I never had a job, in the sense that I never really settled for a full-time job in my life, because I was always scared that that check will diminish my hunger to do
Yeah.
what I wanted to do. But that's me. It doesn't mean that it's the only way. So I'm very careful before I start ranting about entrepreneurship, because other people have absolutely no interest in
Sure.
those sleepless nights,
Yeah.
or in all the stress that comes with entrepreneurship.
Yeah. They have to find their own said it wrong.
Ikigai, correct.
And finally, if you were going to give a piece of advice to young Eman who was doing the triple jump all those years ago, and when you were just starting out on your journey, what would that advice be if you had an opportunity to speak to your younger self?
I wish I had that luxury. Nurture the fire, keep it alive, do keep taking risks. So from that point of view, I don't regret anything. I wish I had mentors I could bounce ideas off with. So I learned a lot by doing rather than by listening. So the only advice I would give to my younger self is to reach out for those who have been there before me,
Sure.
and to listen maybe a bit more. But other than that, I love the journey. I love all the stress, the sleepless nights that I've had. It has made me who I am today.
Thank you, Eman. It's been a pleasure. We've been on a journey from your childhood through to SiGMA and Japanese culture and beyond in a relatively short period of time. We wish you the best of luck for the future and look forward to seeing what's coming next for you.
Appreciate you for having me. Thank you, Dan.